that. So what was it that drove you this direction in the first place? Like what's the journey or the story that got you to caring about this?
Well, I've been a nanny. I mowed lawns as a kid, and then I moved into the customer service industry. I did sales, and then I became a nurse. I was also in education as a teacher's aide. I mean, I've done so many different things. And then in my late 20s, became a nurse. And in every job I've ever had, that always played such a huge role, was just that safety in your workplace. Like, how do you feel? Do you feel safe to speak your mind? Do you feel valued? Do you feel like you're able to give feedback to these people? And a lot of times the answer was no. So why I'm so passionate about this, to be honest, I think is because I've worked for so many bad organizations.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was just like, it doesn't have to be this way. And that's the biggest thing that I've noticed, is that it's a lack of self-awareness and knowledge. Really, that's all it is. And once you help people become aware of their behaviors, where they're coming from, why they act the way they do, and then teach them how to change those things, and the results are amazing. And it makes people healthier and happier. And so much of our physical health is tied to our mental health. And that's kind of just where I found my passion once I started doing all this research. And really, when I started doing the research was about 8 years ago now.
Long, yeah.
It's been a long time. And it was my first job I got right out of NP school was in a diabetes clinic.
Okay.
And I think I went to nursing school and to NP school thinking, I want to help people. I want to make a difference. And that job at the diabetes clinic, it wasn't what I expected. I wasn't getting the results I wanted. I was providing all the education that I could, and I would see patients and then give them all this education, try to help. And then 3 months later, they'd come back and there were no changes, or if anything, they were worse. And that's what really got me thinking, like, there's something that I'm not doing. I need to be doing better, because this isn't working, what I'm doing. And there's a statistic I like. It's 1 out of 7 people will change when their life depends on it. And so change is really, really hard. And I saw that in my practice. And I was thinking, I'm not making this difference in my patients' lives like I thought I would. And even with all the education I would present to them, all these tools, and it just changes. It was really, really hard for them. And I thought, I need to do better. So I started doing my own research and looking into behavior change and why. And a lot of it comes down to your experiences of stress and trauma and working through those things. And so that's kind of where this all started from, was there.
So what did the research tell you? So 8 years ago, you start asking yourself this question, like, why isn't this working? I'm doing everything I can, but it's not getting the results that I want to get. There's something else. And so you get into the research, and like, what are the stories that start to emerge?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with chronic stress and having experiences. So getting those positive behavior changes.
Yeah.
It's hard. You have neural pathways in your brain for so a thought occurs, and then what you do with that thought creates a behavioral, physiological, and emotional response. And those responses are like thought patterns, neural circuits, and they happen really, really fast. So, and it's based on your experiences, which shapes your perception. So think about like someone who's afraid of dogs because they were bit when they were a child. As soon as they see a dog really fast, their response is fear. And
Right.
Someone else who loves dogs is going to approach it a very different way. And so that's what I work a lot with people on, is working on their perception and trying to help change those thought patterns into positive ones so that it helps them make those changes. And like I said, a lot of times people just aren't aware. It's a lack of self-awareness, because those thought patterns, that chain reaction happens so fast that a lot of times we're not aware of it. And if you can just work on changing those into more positive ones, then that's where you see those changes come about. And there's the top-down approach, which is working on your thought processes, which, like I said, affect your emotional, behavioral, and physiological responses. And then there's the bottom-up approach, which is working on making those behavior changes, which then affect your thoughts. So
Okay.
I use both with my patients. I work on behavior changes, and then I also work on changing the top down, working on the thoughts, changing
With
those
the
thoughts.
same people? So the same people are working
Mhm.
on both at the same time? Okay.
Yeah. So, because a lot of times I've found that if you can, so, think about just like when you've had a really bad day and all you want to do is just lay down and disappear. And it
Yeah.
actually has, yeah. And they've shown that one of the best coping mechanisms is actually to socialize or get up and go outside into nature. And you're not really feeling like you want to do that. So I talk to people a lot about that. That would be a bottom up approach, just changing the behavior.
Okay.
So rather than go crawl into bed and kind of, you're feeling a little sorry for yourself, it's been a really bad day. What if you went out and met with a really positive group of people, even though you're kind of feeling a little resistant to it because your thoughts are trying to take you in one direction? But if you work on the behavior change, then you can see better results. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, and haven't conquered it, right? Like I mean, we all know what that feels like. Yeah, I definitely know what that feels like. And yeah, that it feels so risky to do when when you're emptied out and at
Yeah.
the end of your day and you know that you're not quite right and that like your tank is really empty. And then this idea of going out into the world just feels like, well, what if one more thing goes wrong? Like I'm not capable of it, I'm all raw. Why I shouldn't do that. But if you don't, it's a guaranteed what you've always done before if you don't. So
Right.
you might as well take a chance on something different happening because you're guaranteed to do what you have always done if you just continue.
Right. And there is something to be said, like for introverts, extroverts, right? Like
Right,
I
right.
having your own personal time is very, very important. I'm a little bit more of an introvert. So me, yeah, sometimes just checking out for a little bit is how I build myself back up. But definitely we all need our community and to socialize. And I think um, that's just something to keep in mind when I was talking about the bottom up
Yeah.
approach is I realize even in myself I tend to isolate a lot, and just sometimes when I get out and who you choose to spend that time with too is really important. You want to make sure it's a positive group of people that have a good influence on you, like you said, instead of like creating one more negative thing that will drag you down, So, yeah, who you choose to go spend that time with, but yeah, or even just if you don't feel, I talk on the phone all day long, so sometimes I don't feel like that, but then I'll go out and instead of hiding in a dark room, I'll go out and hike or go out in nature, do something else that fills my cup up. So.
Yeah. I like nature as a solution. And when you are done with socializing, that you still just going outside makes such a big difference. Just, you know,
Yeah,
hugging the tree and walking around and getting your eyes looking farther and breathing different air. It matters.
it really does. Yeah.
I
And so,
wanted to ask about like what you said organizationally. So you were saying like, and I'm kind of like seeing the difference between working with individuals and working with organizations. Because you were like, it's really more about awareness. Like once you're aware that you have this pattern, and I'm interested in like, is that also true at an organizational level? Is it really about awareness, or is it? Because I think it's so easy in our corporate environment to think there's intent, right? Like that
Mhm.
and I think sometimes certainly there is corporate momentum that is not savory, that is intentionally not savory. But do you feel like in most cases at an organizational level, it really is just about education and awareness?
Yeah, I do.
Wow, that's so hopeful.
Yeah. Well, and I think so what I'm doing my dissertation on, this psychological safety, I think a lot of companies focus on productivity and like profit. There we go.
Yeah, yeah.
Productivity, profit. That's kind of what their main focus on. But what they don't realize is that the environment and the culture that they're creating at the office, or any
Yeah,
industry, like I said, it can be any industry. That environment and culture that they're creating can kill productivity and kill profit if they're not creating a safe environment for their employees. And a disengaged workforce makes more mistakes.
yep.
They're not as healthy, so they miss more work days. There's more employee turnover. And so that's what I found is it's one of the psychological safety, that work environment that you create is one of the most important things that a company can focus on. And like I said, most of the time they're concerned more on profit and productivity, but they don't realize how big of an impact that environment has on profit and productivity. So
Is there some good data that supports that we could sprinkle in?
well, I just read one on nurses. So nurses that are happier and feel safer in their work environment, they have better patient satisfaction scores. They make fewer errors.
Okay.
So, and who's taking care of the patients? The nurses, but they're more focused on, their focus is not on taking care of the nurse who directly has the biggest influence over the patient satisfaction score. They're more focused on the patient. It's like, well, if you took better care of your nurses, who would then take better care of your patients? Yeah. But it translates into any industry. I'm working with a company right now. The warehouse workers are not being as productive. They're not. And so I'm going to go in and work with them and try to talk with them, figure out what's going on. And that's what I helped the leader of that company realize was, there's something going on right now that is affecting the productivity of these workers. We need to talk to them, figure out what it is. Once you fix that, you're going to improve your cost. And at first it was hard for me to convince them that this was important. They don't want to pay for that. But it's like, well, you're losing money right now because of this. So if you can fix this issue, if you can help your workers be happier and more productive, and that increases loyalty and they're more engaged. And when employees are disengaged, they're kind of think of like someone who just wants to do the bare minimum.
Yeah. Or even take get the most they can from a situation versus feeling invested in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And motivated and inspired. So I think the biggest hesitancy that I've seen companies is they don't want to spend that extra money to invest in their employees. But really, in the end, if they would, it does increase their profit.
What does it look like to achieve psychological safety organizationally? Like, what are some of the things that matter to that?
So trust is huge, and transparency, and respect. So, and oh gosh, it's all the buzzwords, right? Like vulnerability. So vulnerability, I think, is one of the biggest ones. And usually that one, so when someone makes themselves vulnerable, they're willing to ask for help. They're willing to admit when they don't know something. They want feedback. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to be better. And I think I've seen just in these leaders, as they work their way to the top, there's this stigma surrounding them that they're supposed to know everything. They're supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be this just larger than life human that doesn't have feelings and emotions and have bad days like the rest of us. And so then that decreases their I don't want to say ability, because they still are able to be vulnerable, their desire to be vulnerable, maybe I should say, because they're trying to fit that persona, because we look at them as leaders. A great example of that is the SEALs that I work with. They're supposed to be the toughest humans on the planet, and they're still human, though. They still bleed and they're still human. But they have this huge bar to live up to as being the most mentally tough, strongest, invincible, almost superhumans. And where they are they're very strong, but they still have feelings and emotions. And watching them struggle with that is a lot that I see in the corporate leadership world too. These leaders that have these big burdens on their shoulders, and they feel like, almost like the SEALs do, like they have to always be perfect. And so just helping them learn that it's okay to be vulnerable, because when they act like that, it can affect their whole organization. And so seeing your leader be able to be vulnerable and demonstrate those characteristics, asking for help and admitting when you don't know something, asking for feedback, that desire to want to learn and grow and continuously work on yourself and be better, it can really help inspire their workforce to do the same. And it makes people more innovative and creative. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, modeling the behavior makes room for it. Like you're creating space for that as a leader. That seems
yeah,
really obvious, but yeah, I can see why that's not the default.
yeah.
Is that where you
And
start with leadership? Sorry to interrupt.
oh yeah. Yeah. So when you're doing these corporate wellness programs, it does work better if everyone's on the same page. So even the employees, and I think that's another common mistake that I see a lot of companies make is they just train their leadership. It's kind of like trying to teach them to herd cats, though, right? So you want to have everybody on the same page. So when they say something, it lands. Like the employee knows, like, okay, I have the same knowledge base that they do, and I understand where they're coming from and why they're saying that. And so that's what I like to work with the entire organization. But you do start with leadership and then work your way down. I like to work in groups. So I like to take, if the company is large, then the leader of a certain department or group, work with that group with their leader in it, because it's good for their leader to be involved.
Yeah, yeah. Is that hard to get? Like, do people show up in the same way with their leader involved? Is it hard to crack the ice of that if they don't have trust with their leader?
Yes. So working with the leadership a little bit first,
Oh, okay.
and getting them kind of used to the idea, and then and letting them know, like what we just said, you're setting the stage. So if you're showing up and you're not into it and you're not willing to make yourself vulnerable, then that's going to bleed into the experience of your people as well.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Where else do you go? So you start by how people are showing up and how you're building trust, how you're creating room for vulnerability. What are the other components of the ways that you work with organizations?
I think every single person, and I know this is so cliche to say, but every single person should act like a leader in their job.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. And so it's so important that each individual do their own self work and
Okay.
evaluate their own mindset, their own beliefs. And because, like I said, change is the ability to change requires self-awareness, and then the knowledge on how to change and kind of how that's showing up. And so I like to work with people on that and kind of just have them evaluate. A lot of times it can be their past experiences that have led them to have these negative thought processes that they go through. And it's just all about identifying those, recognizing when you're in them, and then changing that. And a good example from my own life is I was raised in a family where women were not valued as much as men. And then now I work with a bunch of men. And anytime I feel like I'm not being valued enough, or if someone says something that kind of rubs me the wrong way, I immediately go into defense mode of
Oh,
and I have to work really hard and on changing those thought processes and those patterns, because it can make, when you're in that fight or flight defensive mode, you're more emotional and reactive.
yeah.
And I have to constantly just take a time out and step back and think about it and think about how I'm reacting. Am I overreacting? And is this reaction stemming more from that my past that's coming back and kind of creating this? Um, so yeah, I try to work a lot with people in identifying issues like that.
Yeah.
They don't bring that into new relationships, because it can create a vicious cycle of recreating the same experiences over and over again.
Yeah, it absolutely does, right? You react in the same way and then it makes it true. And then like you create the same response from this new person. And then, yeah, and then your truth just gets validated and validated.
Yes, and then
Yeah.
yes, exactly. So you have, like I was saying, those neural pathways, those thought neural circuits, those thought patterns in your brain. And like you just said, when you keep doing the same behaviors that reinforce those thought patterns, it can be really, really hard to change.
Yeah,
So
it can. You just believe it more and more. Yeah, I relate to your story about your family of origin being more like having different gender values for because I was in a military family. Is your family military?
No,
Oh,
from south of Texas though. So
okay. Just the rednecks. Yeah, we're
yeah.
military rednecks. And so, but yeah, but I was basically trained that men are authority figures, that like it's my job to do what they tell me to do. And that you have to, that there's this deference, or even worse, that you have to like drive from the back seat, that essentially it's your job to do everything, but make it seem like he did it. And so certainly I like in my career, that was a reaction too. Like when men come at me with authority, I instantly like get small and go, okay, how can I help you? And so it took a long time to be like, wait, I can be the boss. I can stand up. I can make room for other people. Like I have the same, I have the same ticket to show up. But it really, you do have to notice it each time it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. It's hard to sometimes to change that in the moment as well. And so one thing that really helps with that is mindfulness. One of the most transformative things you can do is it's like it puts the brake on those thought processes. Because like I said, they happen really, really fast. And when you practice mindfulness, it can kind of help you learn how to pause for just a second and redirect those thoughts.
Do you help people with the mindfulness practice, like dedicated time where they're working on creating space for their mind so that they can employ it when it comes up during the day? Or is it more about doing it in an instant?
It's so it's better to do it when you're not in the moment.
Yeah.
That is one of the tools I teach people though, is as soon as you feel like you're going into fight or flight, as soon as you're feeling defensive, as soon as you feel your heart rate go up, your palms get sweaty, as soon as you feel emotional, that's time to take a little bit of a time out, which can be hard because sometimes in those moments you can't.
Yeah.
But that's where mindfulness, I don't recommend practicing it in that moment. Unless you have time to go take a time out and do some deep breathing, then great. But if you don't, doing the mindfulness in your off time will help you in those moments redirect your thoughts.
Yeah.
So that if you don't have time to take a time out, it's like, okay, wait, pause, like really quick second, and then it's training your brain how to do that quickly. And it's like anything else, the more you train it, the easier it becomes to do.
Yep. Absolutely. Just building strength in that. Do you want to share an individual or organizational experience where you've seen some change and like where it went?
Yeah, well, because I was just thinking, it was more when I was working with the SEALs and seeing they do a lot of leadership events, like team building leadership events.
Okay.
And in these events, we would work with these large corporations, and I would see the interactions between the employees, and I would see this lack of safety. I would see things would get emotional sometimes. And so I started, again, it was just reinforcing the need for it. Like it's amazing. No matter the environment, people are people. And yeah. And so I was seeing these, a big strength of mine as I'm able to recognize patterns. And
Okay.
so I was seeing all these patterns in behavior. And I was like, I'm seeing this over and over again. I see it in myself. I see it in my friends. I see it in my family. That's when I came to realize, I was like, a lot of this just comes down to the fact that we're not self-aware, first of all, and it happens so fast. We lack the knowledge on how these things affect us and how we can change them. And so, yeah, that working with the SEALs and seeing, we worked with a lot of big corporations and just seeing those patterns of behaviors in the corporate world again. It's in the same in the health world as well. Just was like, yeah, this is needed everywhere. So any relationship, 80% of our problems are relational.
Yeah, seriously.
And how we relate to humans. And so just helping people better relate to one another. It starts with how you relate to yourself. So that's where I start with people is, let's work on how you feel about yourself, where your thoughts are, where your mindset is. And let's work on improving that. And then once you do your own self-work, then you're able to help the people around you. Set that example, like you were saying, set that example, help them grow. But if you haven't done your own self-work, not only are you limiting yourself, you're limiting then the people around you. So
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's a responsibility of leadership, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
which is everyone, like you said.
Which is everyone. Right. Well, because one bad egg, so to speak, can affect an entire group. That's one of the biggest things um, that can affect someone's mindset is who's around.
Yeah, I mean, we've all experienced that where you've got this great group and then one person shows up and they're like, oof, the whole flavor changes and everything gets hard.
Absolutely. And one of the examples I like, this is a good one for the SEALs.
Okay.
Anytime when I go out with them, um, I feel very safe. Of course. I mean, I'm surrounded by a team of Navy SEALs. So we go to a lot of foreign cities. I find myself in situations where I'm not comfortable. I don't know. I have never been in here before. And it's funny to watch them move because just without even talking, they do surround me because I am the weakest link in that regard, as far as my training to defend myself and things like that. So and I thought, well, what if everyone had a team of Navy SEALs surrounding them? How
Yeah.
would they feel? And that's the kind of environment you want to create at work, one where people feel safe, they feel supported, they know you have their back, they can walk with you you can walk down a dark alley and feel safe and know that it's kind of the equivalent of like, I might not be sure, but I have people I can turn to and ask for help. I know that if I make a mistake, they'll catch me if I fall, kind of
Mhm.
thing. And that's been one thing for me, just that has been really neat to work with them because I don't think that I've ever, just as I think as women, sometimes being put in situations where we don't feel safe, and to have, a team of people that are protecting you, it feels amazing.
It does. And I think, I like how you said when you said, I'm the weakest link, you didn't say because I'm female, which I think would have been a totally appropriate thing to say. You said because of my training. And and that reminds me of, the fact that they're doing that because they know their strength. They know that they are trained to do that, that that's their job is to do that. And I think that that's something that as teams in organizations we can do, which is like identify our strengths, and that it's not that there is stronger and weaker, it's that there are like my strengths and your strengths and their strengths and our strengths
Mhm.
together and our weaknesses together. And that if you have this ability to kind of do this dance as an organization where you're like, your SEAL team is surrounding the weak thing, but then it morphs because now that person has a strong thing that surrounds another weak thing, so that there's this kind of like moving landscape of strengths creating protection, and being
Absolutely.
aware of what those are so that it's not a hierarchy, it's a dance.
Yes, I like that. I like, you called it a dance. The the most high functioning teams are the ones that are the most diverse. And the more
Ah,
diverse the team is, the harder it is to create safety, because each
yeah.
person then now needs to have done their own self work and be able to relate well. And so there's that really famous Google study. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, where they set out to try to define what made a high functioning team. So they looked at all their teams and they went in and studied them. And they originally started looking at like education level, experience, title, and they didn't come up with anything. They were like, no, this none of this correlates. We have this like super experienced, educated team over here, but this more inexperienced, uneducated one is outperforming them. And what it came down to was which team was able to create the most safety, psychological safety, and communicate better and work well with each other, do the dance. Who is the better dancer, right?
Wow, that's a
Cool.
beautiful study. And I don't know, that's such a nice such a nice thing to put out to in a time where diversity is being devalued. Again, like that's a nice conversation to keep going.
Yes, and I think that is where doing our own self work comes in, is because rather than when one of our greatest needs as humans is to want to belong, to be loved and feel like we belong. And
Hmm.
so when we meet, so we have this tendency to want to surround ourselves with people that make us feel that way. And that's great. And we all need that. We all need our supporters, but we also need people that challenge us and to help us grow. So that's where that diverse team comes in. And if we can do our own self work and not get defensive and realize that we have so much to learn from people that are different from us, and find common ground with people that are different from us, so that we don't isolate ourselves and only hang out with people that are like-minded and think like us, because then we miss out on such a huge opportunity to learn and grow from people that are different.
Yeah, absolutely. The learning and growing, and also to challenge our own sense of empathy and openness.
And compassion. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna ramble a little bit about something that's in my head, and it's not a question, but I'm gonna try to find, like, maybe we can find something in it, but kind of where I'm going, and the reason that I love this conversation and that we're doing this is because like when I started my business, it was because I needed a place. Like I didn't want to function like you. I had been, like most of us, I had been in jobs that were damaging and were unsustainable, and I felt were not good for me as a human, and simply like I was not capable of doing more of it. Like I just hit the wall, and so I was like, I'm basically unemployable. What am I going to do about it? I'm going to need to make my own thing. And so that was like, oh my gosh, like probably 20 years ago. Like what year? How old am I? Yeah, it was 20 years ago that I started doing that. And so I made my first company, and then I did work with another small company for a while, and then I spun this one off. But it was because I wanted an environment where I got treated the way I wanted to be treated. And then little by little, it created an environment where everyone who works with us gets treated the way I want to be treated. And we make that as a culture. And it's best with people who have seen the other side of it and really know what that means, and who have already had a job that doesn't work great. Um, so as we have done this, for a lot of years, I really felt like I was kind of hiding behind my business, like, I'm getting away with this a little bit. And then, but it was really profitable, and we do really good work, and like it was really successful. And I kept it small on purpose because I didn't want it to be a behemoth. I didn't want it to get ugly or, grow an extra head or anything. And so little by little, I started realizing, like, wait, this works. Like, this actually works. Like, this is a better company than what I've seen before. And I started, and this is the year where I'm like, I'm gonna just be proud of that. Like, I'm gonna talk about that. I'm gonna say, we as a corporate community need to identify that a lot of the things that got us this far are not the best that we can do, and they're not sustainable, and they aren't human, and they don't bring out potential in people, they don't bring out the best profit, and they don't treat people with the humanity that makes us all thrive in the world. And so that's what I love about, like, this connection. I want to tell stories of other people who feel that same way and are building things that go with it. And so that's why I'm sorry I don't have a direction for sharing that, but I'm trying to figure out, like, what we can talk about around that, because what I want to lead with in this story is like your vision for that change. And like, because you're telling me the same things, like I've experienced that, and I'm not going to stand for it. I'm going to build something that
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. So what I've tried to do is that's exactly, I broke it down into a foundation, and that's I created my wellness course.
Okay.
And I was like, well, where do we start? So it starts with each individual, and that's what I do. I start there. I start working with them on their mindset, on their thoughts, on their experiences, kind of where identifying some of these behaviors that are no longer serving them. Because one of the biggest things is that the we might not understand why someone's doing something. To us, it might seem totally irrational, but to them, it serves a purpose. At some point, it served a purpose for them to protect them. And they maybe have outgrown that purpose, but they don't realize it. Or maybe they need they need a new tool. Maybe that tool worked in that situation, but it's no longer serving them. And so helping them realize that, hey, there's a better way. And they just maybe don't know that way. So helping them discover that is really, really important. So that's where I start. I start with on the individual level, and then we gradually work up towards communication, and which, like I said, everyone's greatest desire is this love and belonging, is to feel like they're loved and they belong. So we work a lot on communication, and then individuality, finding their purpose, finding their passion, helping them live happier lives. So that's kind of that's the course right now that I have, is just creating a strong foundation with which to build on.
How do you do that with individuals? I mean, that's pretty high touch to be able to identify. That's kind of like individual therapy for each person. Do you have a system for doing that in a way that allows you to serve a whole team at once, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, so I have a workbook because a lot of it is personal, and some people you have to be really, really careful. Everybody has experienced some form of trauma in their life.
Yeah.
Nobody escape this world will escape this world without having some form of trauma. So you do have to be careful because you can send people into these deep trauma responses when you're bringing up their past, when you're bringing up these negative thought patterns. They were created for a reason, and it's usually for protection. So when you're evaluating people and you're getting to these thought patterns and you're getting to the underlying issue, because that's the problem is where change doesn't occur, is because I feel like a lot of programs don't get to those underlying issues. And that is something that I decided that with my program, I wasn't going to skirt around it and I wasn't going to be afraid of it, because otherwise, what good is it? I have to get to the below the surface or I'm not doing it justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a delicate process. So I do try to keep my class size small. This is not I would not want to do this in a room full of 100 people. And it's creating and believe it or not, what I've seen is really neat is, like you said, it's really important that in that space, they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And getting them to connect with one another and seeing that vulnerability, because a lot of times everybody has a story and a lot of times we don't know what that story is. Yeah. And if we did understand them a little bit better, we would have more empathy and compassion for them and maybe be more willing to help them. Because instead, what do? We're like, you jerk, right? I don't like him. I'm staying away from him. But then, maybe once you start to understand where some of those behaviors are coming from, then now you're more empathetic and compassionate and willing to try to take that next step and reach out to them and connect with them and try to help them. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, for people is to let their guard down and let people in and be vulnerable with them. But it's one of the things they need the most, right?
It's risky. It feels so risky to do that, because if that guy's a jerk and you're like, oh no, what if he's gonna, come in and trample on my little flowers that I'm I'm tending, and then but that's the only way through is to make that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is hard. And I mean, there's definitely like setting boundaries and what you will and will not tolerate. And I'm not saying like you should, tolerate certain behaviors that are unsafe too. And it definitely requires a mediator or someone involved that's like guiding people through this in a safe way too. So
what kinds of results are you seeing with people?
Relief is the only way I can describe it.
Okay.
Yeah. My favorite is I have everything I've done, I've designed to try to make them think, to create that self-awareness, right? So it's providing examples, so stories, and then the science and the education behind it, and then giving them a tool to use to employ what I've just talked about. Mm-hmm. And my favorite is just to watch people's faces change as I'm talking. They kind of, they get their thinking face on, and that's my favorite look, is just the
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Hey, what questions should I be asking you? Like, what other what topics would you want to talk about? Like, what questions should I ask that I haven't asked?
One thing is that, I feel like a lot of employers, they want the loyalty, they want the motivation, the innovation, they want the high performers, the productivity, but they're not willing to create the environment to support that. Yeah. And it's like they expect one thing, but they don't realize what their part in creating those people is. And that's what I try to do, is teach these corporations that if that's what you want, then this is how you get there. But a lot of them start with, well, I need this and you better do this. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, no, you did this list, A, B, C, D, E, which just killed all that trust and respect. And,
you tried to pull it out of them with your claws.
Yeah. And it's like, no, we need to work on creating these environments so that people can be those best high top performers for you, because I read a stat too that I can find for you if you want, that it takes 2 people to do the job of a high performer. So
so make a high performer. You can
make a high performer.
learn to do it.
Yeah. learn how to do it, learn how to support someone that so that they can perform at their best. So
Yeah.
and so a lot of times, like I was saying, it comes down to kind of, are you willing to put the time and the money to invest into your employees to then give you a better outcome? And they just want the outcome.
Yeah.
Is what I see. So
I wonder if that's the marketing, like the beginning of the marketing message of it, if it's like, because if there's a positive spin on it, not the like, why am I not getting what I want out of these people? Well, you have a responsibility to do this. But if it's like, hey, would you like, there is an opportunity to create high performers. There is a way to stop Copilot. They're like, here's how you create high performers, and this is two people's worth of work and increase profit and whatever. But like, what you have to do is learn how to build this environment. I don't know. I think there's an aspirational picture there.
yeah,
Maybe Gina.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing, I like Disney has a great wellness program, Nike, Google. I haven't seen anyone employing kind of more the mental side of it, like what I'm
Okay.
doing. So they focus a lot on the employee's physical health, which is great.
Yeah.
But a lot of someone's physical health is tied to their mental health.
Right.
And so that's what I do is I combine both. Like, okay, we're going to do this for the physical, the behavioral changes, help you manage stress. And I teach a lot about that. And then I also teach a lot on the mindset, the working on your thought processes, and things like that. So
I'm so glad you didn't sell your program. Like, I think that you've done so much work to make this, and it's headed, I mean, you've got such a great vision for it, and so much,
thank you.
so much capability to do it. And like, it's a beautiful company. And I think I'm glad you're going to get the fruit of it, and that you get to keep shaping it.
Yeah, thank you. Everything happens for a reason. So
Yeah.
it's so funny. I was just thinking that this morning too. I was like, because now that it's finally starting to come to fruition, I'm like, oh, you just totally sold yourself short.
Yeah. Yeah, you really would have. And isn't that funny? There's kind of like the little test right before things get great.
Yes.
Sometimes I think there's this like, are you sure you don't want to sell out? And like, okay, here we go.
Yes. It's going to be hard, but you got this.